For the longest time, I never viewed Solarpunk as retrofuturism, but more akin to cyberpunk of a future world that could be possible, depending on the route we chose and took. After making this channel and series, a thing that has struck me is that aside from renewable energy and storage tech, literally every fix to our Solarpunk future is to go back to older, more robust, and resilient practices that eliminate so much pointless waste that had to be sold to us and normalized for us by marketing to make the rich richer. Just imagine that in the fight between labor and capitalism, labor had won in the US and Europe. Marx assumed that industrial France with fully built-up physical and mental infrastructure created by capitalism would be the center of socialism, and never dreamed that backwater Russia with barely any of either would be the start of it. The point of communism was to deal with a post-scarcity era that technology, automation, and scientific advancements would eventually make possible. It's why no socialist nation or communist party has ever referred to their nation as communist. They were nowhere near to reaching a post-scarcity era yet. Richard Nixon and Milton Friedman even believed in a post-scarcity era where by the year 2000, a single worker family member would only have to work 20 hours a week to live a good life, and why George Jetson only had to work 2 hours a week, but the joke was that he complained about it the same way people working 40 hours a week do. Part of me wonders if Art Nouveau isn't the most solarpunk of all the art genres, inspired heavily by natural designs and nature at its heart. Its only flaw is that during its time, class divide ensured much of the public didn't have access to it, and it was beautiful for the rich, but barely enriched the lives of many of the poor at the time. Who knows how it would have evolved if World War I hadn't broken out. The Craftsman style was a much more toned down and rustic version of Art Nouveau that was actually enjoyed by the masses that over time could have become more elaborate into Nouveau as technology and better pay made them more affordable. These days, thanks to digital design, image libraries, and 3D printing available to the masses, everyone can enjoy that art style. I see little solarpunk art that embraces it, though I've heard some say that early solarpunk started out as mostly Art Nouveau. Most of them lean more heavily into the punk aspect of sort of the rough amateur yet community-based wholesomeness that is at the core of solarpunk. It also tends to embrace the organic mess of technology interspersed with either nature or an eco-brutalist aesthetic. Community-focused art is almost jarring in terms of modern aesthetics. However, I do wonder how well the blending of the two genres could make the movement pop more and draw people in who were unaware of it prior. Today, Art Nouveau is no longer the art of the bourgeois. Just like many other things that used to be only affordable by the rich, we all now own because technology has made it available to the masses. Much like how steampunk creates a better, more enjoyable past that sadly never actually was, but could have been without colonialism, sexism, and slavery, as well as the rules of science working completely differently, solarpunk can be something similar, especially since so many solarpunk fixes basically require us to revert back in time to practices and designs that used to be normal until capitalism and shitified it for us. Urbanism, go back 75 years. Sustainable community, go back 100 years. Right to repair, go back just 20 years. All we need now is the continued march of progress in energy production and storage, and everything else is just going back in time and eliminating all the waste we currently produce to make the powerful more powerful. I had no idea that I was doing this, but almost every single video I've made on this channel has started out with me explaining how things used to be, how capitalism destroyed it, and how to go back to the way things used to be. Solarpunk as retrofuturism would be a what if it had never been corrupted by capitalism. This might be a better lens to look at solarpunk. A solarpunk future is uncertain and nebulous and hard to wrap your head around. What if sustainable community had never been fragmented by atomized individuality? What if single use hadn't become the norm? What if the suburbs had never been built and urban density was at a sustainable level? What if the long soul-sucking commutes by cars was never a thing? What if companies hadn't switched to make durable goods disposable? And what if the labor movement had progressed like Nixon assumed it would, as we all had the time and energy to pursue our hobbies and repair things like people were able to afford to do back in the 50s to the 70s? Creating an alternative timeline where this happened can be pieced together by other cultures in history at the time. Soviet nations, unlike capitalist ones, weren't able to exploit their colonialist holdings, so they were forced to live within their means, something the US hasn't been forced to do in over a century. Soviet nations in the 70s were just as industrialized as the US, but were still forced to think sustainably. Their housing design is fascinating, as their commie block continued to improve, organized to be set up to easily get to their jobs. Food was more communally shared, as they had cafeterias people could go to and pay very little for food. Even their soda fountains had basically one cup and pressurized water that you could wash it with that still wasn't as hygienic as one would like, and the cups often got stolen to drink vodka with, but it still produced zero waste. As I said in the Solarpunk gardening section, Havana, Cuba gets 90% of its food grown in the city, and it's 100% organic and not by choice at all. Soviet systems, of course, are not the target for Solarpunk, as much more freedom is what we also want, and we don't want 92% of all citizens engaged in some form of black market work and picking their jobs based on what they can steal and sell from their factory. But we can see how things could have gone if the West had been non-colonial and forced to live within its means, letting the people of other nations actually enjoy the fruits of their own labor, all the while making constant breakneck strides in science and technology and automation. I think it's a really good thought experiment and lens to see Solarpunk from the retrofuturistic mindset. For one thing, it allows us to think about what could have been. Right now, no matter what, climate change is here, and going to get worse for a while even if we went full Solarpunk tomorrow. There is always a level of doomerism and fear and post-destruction in Solarpunk. Retrofuturistic Solarpunk eliminates all of that and allows us to view it through the lens of pure hope, like how the pre-Cold War media was so full of hope about a better living through science until the Cold War made the future suddenly a scary place of existential dread. We go through these periods of intense excitement and hope for the future until we realize it blinded us to the dread it created. It started with the Second Industrial Revolution, where the future was going to be amazing until the robber barons ruined it. The atomic age was supposed to be idealistic and serene until it became nightmare fuel. In the early 2010s, tech bros painted an amazing future through computers and tech and communication on all the TED Talk stages, only to end up in a nightmare world where fascism has returned and we own nothing. Blind futurism is dangerous, especially under capitalism, as they will overhype and oversell and then just steal our labor out from under us and constantly force us to generate more and more waste just to survive. Imagine a sustainable future where we continue to make fast strides in science and technology, a NASA-level budget that makes up 4% of the government budget, as opposed to the 0.5% it has now, and that will continue to decline over the next 4 years because people can't see fascists for what they really are. Sustainable and robust futurism is the key, or it will return to a dystopian nightmare. Hence why Solarpunk as retrofuturism, just like Steampunk, is a great way to view pure hope-based Solarpunk. Imagine the world where labor won and the rich are in poverty compared to our rich, and we can live within the means of our planet. We would all know how to organize sustainable communities, either in rural communities or dense but not crowded clean cities with very, very little going into landfills. The Soviet Union went from backwater feudalism to space in 40 years. Just imagine what a fully industrialized US could have accomplished if the first and second Red Scares hadn't turned the workers against each other using racism, sexism, and colonialism. Viewing climate change as a laughable hypothetical no sane race would allow to happen, it would just be uphill from there for all of us. Gradual process toward a better, freer world with a strong sense of belonging that we all feel is missing but can't put our finger on as to what it is we are missing, so we use vices and materialism and religion and approval to fill it and never actually feel fulfilled. What kind of fashion and aesthetics would the 80s, 90s, and 2000s have been if things had been sustainable? My guess is very different. Computers would have still made their debut, and perhaps progressed even faster than we all know, but the e-waste would have been much less. Dark music would probably be a lot less during that time, except as ways to remember the past. The oil crisis under Carter may have driven us to invest heavily into renewables, instead of Reagan removing solar panels from the White House. Perhaps under Bush Sr. we would have started winding down fossil fuel use if it had stayed a nonpartisan issue like it did with the ozone layer, and lobbyists didn't polarize it. Perhaps had Al Gore won, we would have seen a moon launch-style funding for renewables, but we will never know at this point. One bright point is that the nation of Oman is going to double its population over the next 20 years, but instead of using American but to the extreme infrastructure like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, is going hardcore solarpunk from urbanism to green energy to circular economy, with 80% of all its food being grown in the city. Link is in the below bar. Either way, a solarpunk retro future past without climate crisis may give some even clearer ideas as to how a solarpunk future could work, as the doomerism can blind you to the possibilities that you don't even realize were possible. Mix it with some Art Nouveau and you have a beautiful solarpunk society now, instead of viewing it through the lens of post-apocalypse and the Earth needing to take a century to heal. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. If you wish to be a part of this project, or want your solarpunk art displayed discussing any of our main points of focus, please send everything to solarpunkusa@proton.me. There is also a Patreon link for my main channel if you like what I'm doing. For the first section involving community building, this channel will be run directly by myself. After that point, I hope to make this a collaborative project with many people involved, including voice, information, and editing, to make this a robust channel that can spread and grow.